Okay. Right. Just wait one more minute as people trickle in. All right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third AI conversation from an Edgewalker's perspective. I'm Ximena Vidal, and I'm excited to continue this journey that we started in June. Over the past 2 months, we've explored some deep questions together, the shame and wonder around AI, the Protestant work ethic, concerns about agency and decision-making, and the environmental impact, among other issues with AI. And what's become clear is that we can use spaces like this where we can take what we're reading, what we're living with in this AI age, and actually talk it through together and sit in uncertainty together. And today we're shifting our focus to the organizational level, so that meso level between the individual and society. And many of you are probably experiencing this firsthand or hearing or reading about organizations rushing to implement AI tools, questions about job security, leaders trying to balance efficiency with humanity. And we're currently in the wild west of AI. And the intent today is that we glean some lessons or food for thought from Bill, Prasad, and Brian about using AI from an Edgewalker's lens at the organizational level. And when I talk about organizations, they can be formal and informal, not just because after all, they're social systems. So just to have that consciousness of what an organization is can be, beyond corporations, beyond government agencies. We are all part of different social systems. So as a backdrop, I wanted to first share the 5 Edgewalker skills, which are the doing elements of Edgewalkers, and is also the archetypes of change. I'm going to put in the chat the 2 links where you can pull these up. Here we go. Oh, one moment. I copied both of them at the same time and they're not separated. Here's one. This is with the Edgewalker skills. And this is the other one about archetypes of change. So just really quickly, now the 5 Edgewalker skills are sensing the future, risk-taking, manifesting, focusing, and connecting. And the 5 archetypes of change are Edgewalkers, which are bridge builders who embrace possibilities, flame keepers, hearth tenders, placeholders, and guardians. And so I just want to give this as a backdrop. We're not necessarily going to talk about specific ones, but just as a backdrop, because that's where, it's the work of Edgewalkers, and it's a way of understanding organizations and our place in organizations as well. So with all of that said, I'd like to, again, welcome everyone who's been trickling in, and I'd like to introduce Brian Gorman, who's joining Bill Kirst and Prasad Kaipa for the first time here in this dialogue series. Brian is also certified in Edgewalker assessments. And Brian, I know that you're working on a book about the future of work and that you have decades working with individuals and organizations navigating change. So if you can, now tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Well, I think you covered it, Ximena. I grew up in the world of organizational change, moved into coaching 9 years ago. And I think one of the important lessons for me in that transition is that organizational change is a misnomer. It's people that change, not organizations. and organizational change is individual change at scale. I actually met Judy for the first time. I think it was about 19 years ago, when she was presenting Spirit at Work, the Spirit at Work Award to the company that I was working with at the time. I have always been one who has seen a little bit over the horizon. And my projection is that we are heading into a disruption as significant as the introduction of the industrial age. And how we respond to AI will determine the future of work for a long time to come.
Wonderful, thank you. And also to welcome Prasad and Bill as well. Thank you. I'm thrilled to have you back.
Great to be here. Good morning.
Yeah, great to be here again. Looking forward to our interactions today.
So to start off, so looking at the 5 Edgewalker skills: sensing the future, risk-taking, manifesting, focusing, and connecting. In your experience, which of these skills do you think organizations can really lean into successfully with AI? And on the flip side, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth?
I'm happy to start, Ximena. When I look at the skills and kind of the intersection where we're at, one of the things that I think continues to bubble to the surface is the one around risk taking. And I think it's because we, as both individuals and as organized bodies of individuals, organizations, we're at this place we've never been before. I mean, we've talked about it in the sense that there's no manual, there's no answer book written for where we're going or where we're trying. And so I think on a day-to-day basis, whether you're in an organization, at a corporation or a nonprofit, or even in education, in some vein, to use these tools is a little bit like taking a risk. Because as we've talked about in the past, you don't always know, one, what's going to come back to you if you have inquiry with it. And two, you don't necessarily know how it's going to change you as an individual, as a worker, as a knowledge worker, as a curious mind. And so I think the ability to try something that's never been tried before is inherent in the dance that we're trying to do with AI, whether that's, hey, try a prompt you've never tried before, or try a tool you've never tried before, or question in a way you've never questioned before. And I also think if we go to your point around being in the mesosphere, sort of that middle layer, I read yesterday, again, all of this news, late breaking news. I read yesterday that OpenAI essentially gave the enterprise ChatGPT edition to 438 government agencies for the cost of $1 for the year. Now, that was news breaking because everybody's saying, wow, that's a very powerful tool placed in the hands of government workers, to the tune of 3 million government workers. But I think what's really interesting about that is twofold. One is we now have a whole bunch of people who may not have wanted to take the risk in trying these things, who are essentially gifted and granted the opportunity to take risk with it, sanctioned, if you will. And then on the other side of that risk taking, some might say is the business decision that OpenAI made, because according to my back of the envelope math, and I would love people to check this, they are essentially foregoing $2.16 billion in revenue for over a year by placing that in the hands of government workers for $1 for the entire agency, not $1 per user, but $1 for the entire agency. So on both sides of this equation, there's risk taking that is changing the way we interact with these tools and work at work.
Interesting what you say, Bill. You are right about the kind of risk taking that you are mentioning. I also believe probably the manifesting skill in that Edgewalker skills that we talk about is probably going to be one of the most important in organizational transformation, I believe, because risk taking is what we do, manifesting is what happens. So, in some respect, if organizations are not very good in turning the AI vision into action, whether it is through pilots, whether it is through deployment, whether it is through dashboards, whatever they do, uh, they are operating out of fear. A place of fear or maybe another thing which they do a lot more is efficiency. Let's fit it into what you call some kind of a maps, or let's create some competency next levels. That's what they do instead of purpose or vision in that respect. So I believe if we want to integrate AI and organizations, I think another Edgewalker skill I think we need to talk about is focusing. The ability to pause and discern, which is discernment is again a wisdom skill rather than a knowledge-based skill, and focus, concentrate on what actually matters. Like in the Indian context, the Indian wisdom, they talk about a lot, the applying intelligence with equanimity and clarity. That's where I think we generate wisdom as we go forward, not the speed or not the cleverness which the AI brings in. So AI might tempt us to move faster, act faster, but will the transformation happen when we are not aligning with what is the larger purpose, what is the larger dharma? So the last point I'll also say, maybe I should use, let's see, you talk about sensing the future, right? That's the third one that you address. When it is grounded in silence, when it is grounded in, you might call stillness, that unlocks the rest of it. If you don't ground it in stillness, you can do trend forecasting, or you can do all of that stuff, but I think you need to cultivate an intuitive sensing. I think that a human being can do, AI cannot do. So the technology, people, consciousness, when they are all headed together, I think the leaders have to develop that sensing the future as an intuitive skill. Then what we said, manifesting, focusing, all of them start aligning, and the organizations will benefit a lot from there.
For me, one of the big risks is the assumption that going into the future with AI is some sort of continuation of the present. And so, as both Bill and Prasad have mentioned, it really begins for me with sensing the future. How might this future be different? And I personally, and I am connecting with more and more thought leaders who say that the future of work has the potential of being as different from work today as the industrial age is different from the agrarian age. But that does take what Prasad has just said, sensing from silence, sensing from what our intention, our intuition tells us is possible, not just building on what we know and manifesting from what we already know.
Thank you, to all three. And so what I'm hearing is, in one way or another, you're talking about wisdom, like drawing wisdom, um, and just before we started the session, Brian and Prasad were talking, we're discussing in an organization, especially with AI, where human capabilities are enhanced, nor people can do more with less. Where is this wisdom in an organization? Like where is AI problematizing, or not problematizing, but is it upending like where organizational wisdom is located? Because normally, like a common belief is that organizational wisdom is in the C-suite. No, like, this is what we were talking about just before. It's in the C-suite. Like those are the ones, like, the decision makers. Those are the ones who are wise. Those are the ones who know what the organization should do, know what the next steps should be. But with AI, sort of AI is upending it, is upending, this where organizational wisdom is located. And this is related to, in the chat, Bill and Brian, organizational change is essentially individuals change at scale. And Prasad, is questioning that assumption. So I'm curious, to see how, because this is related to where organizational wisdom is also located. So please, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I want to jump in on that.
Please go ahead, Ryan.
Because for me, wisdom is located at every level of the organization. It always has been. The question is whether we continue to only leverage wisdom among certain of the individuals within the organization. And I think one of the things that AI, and I'm paraphrasing a gentleman named Joseph Logan who posted recently on LinkedIn, AI is disrupting the hierarchy because it is driving the ability to act more quickly than we can send things up the chain for decisions and back down. So for me, wisdom has always been at every level of the organization. The question is, do we rethink how and who we allow to share their wisdom as part of the organizational decision-making process?
Yeah. I love this question. Where is the wisdom? I love that question. Like, I mean, first of all, it just makes me want to dive in like it's a warm body of water, and it makes me want to dive into it. Where is the wisdom? And it brings me back in a way to something I remember sort of discerning, to your point, Prasad, in high school, which was the difference and the stages of data to knowledge to wisdom. And even in high school, I remember thinking, well, you can't get to wisdom without living something, without embodying something, without internalizing and going through the motions of something. And I think that's what's really fascinating now, to your point, Ximena, like knowledge, I would say, tacit knowledge, right? Knowledge that exists in our heads that we've never written down, but we've told through storytelling. Like that's all more possibly accessible and available in these technologies. But the wisdom part, I don't know if we're any closer to the wisdom, because what this technology is doing in a way is usurping our ability to live that experience, right? A lot of people are rushing to this sort of answer without having gone through the trials and tribulations and frustrations and scars. To me, that's what makes up the wisdom, the fact that we've lived it and we've grown from it and we've shared collectively in joy and grief and trauma. To me, that's the fabric of what wisdom is. And if we're not careful, we can mistake one for the other too often. One last thing I'll share, which I think is really important, and I read this recently. There are a lot of young people. I heard from a university professor recently that said universities are placing these tools in the hands of their students, right? So universities are going and saying, here's the free version that the university has paid for you all to use these tools. And what's interesting and unexpected is many of those students are choosing not to use the tool that the university has paid for because they don't trust it. They don't trust that it's going to be used in the right way, or it's not going to be used against them. And so some students are electing to pay on their own to get their own subscription so they can have this, for lack of a better term, safer playground to try things without the worry. And I think what that comes down to is trust. It's very, very hard to get to a place of wisdom if there's not an arena of trust where we can try and fail and learn and fall and be caught by another person.
Yeah, I think beautifully said, Bill. And I love what you are saying, because I also, when I wrote the book From Smart to Wise about 12 years ago, I had been also looking at how do we move from intelligence to wisdom. What I began to really realize, and that I need to articulate clearly, is that organizational wisdom is emergent, it is relational, and many times it's very fragile because it takes more than the collection of wise individuals. So there are, let me talk about it in 3, 4 ways, because I wrote about it for myself, but I never really wrote another book because I don't know whether books are what people read these days anymore. So I just started putting only a series of small, small articles. So I feel the source of organizational wisdom, where it stays, is probably it arises out of interactions, and it arises out of culture. Like, for example, the culture that we have right now in this series of dialogues that we are having, we have a shared field, if you want to call. So, I just like Kurt Lewin talked about, it is in the body that the field exists. I think it is in this structure and the system interactions that it stays, organizational wisdom stays. I would also say the nature of the wisdom, organizational wisdom, is not just interpersonal, but it is transpersonal. I think we need to pay attention to the consciousness, because it is not just you and me. I think there is something else, whether you call it consciousness, whether you call the field, whether you call nature, whether you call divine, depending on the context which we are talking about, there is something else. It is the triangle between you, me, and that unnameable, or whatever way you want to name. I think that dimension does not get taken into when we talk about just the individual. So the form it takes, probably the organizational wisdom, for us to recognize, we need to look for patterns of decision making, not just patterns of data, like what you said, Bill, like data and information and knowledge. We need to look at how is the organization being governed, and what is being learned, what is being sensed. So co-sensed and co-created. I don't know whether there is a word like co-sensing. So in that respect, there is fragility because it breaks down very quickly under fear. So as a matter of fact, wisdom and fear do not coexist at any time. I feel fear, even control, like Brian brought up a beautiful point about the executive suites. Do they have wisdom just because they are executives in the higher rank? My sense is there will be, if they raise questions, they challenge assumptions in a gentle, safe way, and if they are willing to learn and reflect and realign with what's happening, on the ground and at the edge, if we can do that, I think that kind of a team that questions, pauses, reflects, and realigns after failure, I think that's where the organizational wisdom stays. It's not in any one place. So organizational wisdom is always emergent. It is not a body of knowledge you can just take it, or take it from my book or Brian's book or Judy's book or something like that. I don't think you can capture wisdom in any one particular place. So forgive me for going long, but this is a topic, it has been on my mind for a very long time.
And hearing the three of you speak, I think about all three of you have worked in the pre-AI era. And now we're living, in this moment of disruption. And what you're all saying, discussing about organizational wisdom and the trust, and like it's rooted in people, no? Obviously, because organizations are social systems in the end. And what and talking about patterns, and here just want to I think about the archetypes of change, no? I do, in your experience, through with pre-AI, but also there has always been technological disruptions, unlike maybe not at the magnitude that we're living in right now, no, but still, no, like there has been technological shifts. Do you see patterns in how leaders and organizations navigate major disruptions? And related to that, like, what's timeless about leading through change?
Brian, do you want to start?
Go ahead, Bill.
What's timeless about leading through change? Well, I tell you what's timely is I'm about to publish a book called Leading Change in the Era of AI tomorrow. So perfect
Wow.
question. So stay
Congratulations.
tuned for that. What's interesting about that, and to your question about what's timeless, I think, pre-AI, post-AI, regardless, all of us, I think, have seen, all three of the speakers at least have seen multiple decades of technology disruption. And each time, what I think is really interesting is what Prasad and Brian have been talking about. No matter how much project planning, implementation, subject matter expertise you sort of throw at it, another tool you throw at it, that change still has to come through you. You still have to have a response to it. And I personally believe that what's timeless is the fact that we show up to any change in a state of dancing with grief or negotiating loss in some form or fashion, even if it's an exciting change. That means we then have to say goodbye to something else. And to me, what's timeless and what I think has worked really well, regardless of the technology disruption, is when we can allow enough room, space, and possibly even grace to encourage us as humans to process, to feel, to emote. In situations where I think we truncate that, what ends up happening to me is kind of a disrespect to people's desire to find themselves in the change. And if people cannot find themselves, envision themselves, or imagine themselves in a future world, then it ends up being a little bit like a disassociation. And that leads to a loneliness. And I think when we're in that stage of feeling isolated or lonely, our higher learning function starts to subside a little bit. Like we can't access our best imaginations and our ideas. And it comes down to the scarcity, and it comes down to the fear. So to me, what is timeless is remembering that we are perfectly imperfect as beings. And even on our best days, we are experiencing all sorts of emotions: sadness, joy, gladness, grief. if we can leave space for that, if we can allow people to remember that, I believe they can work through any change. And my fear now is that we've over-indexed on all the technology, and that we're almost in an unexpected way, we're almost encouraging people to not listen to that place of emotion, not listen to their heart. I'm going to call it heart space. And if I think about the tenets or the archetypes of change, there's an element of sort of the hearth tender and also the flame keeper that I think makes change work really well in organizations when disrupted. I fear that those people, the flame keepers and hearth tenders right now, are thinking that they need to be more quiet. And I would encourage the opposite. I think the flame keepers and the hearth tenders need to stand up more and speak out more for the right reasons.
I would build on what Bill is saying and then add something else. All too often we approach change as if it's this rational, logical, head-centered process.
Yes.
And if we can find the right words, if we can make the right reasoning, it will go smoothly. Change is anything but that. Change is emotional. Change is heartfelt. Change hits us in the gut.
Yeah.
What else is timeless, which is why people like Bill and I and countless others can even think about change management, is that there is a constant journey through every change. Joseph Campbell called it the hero's journey. That journey is inevitably a part of each change cycle, whether it's you, whether it's me, or whether it's a global organization. It's the same journey. And if we learn that journey, and if we learn, the obstacles are different, the catalysts are different, how we respond are different, and ultimately the path is a common one.
Well said, well said. And if I build on both of what you are saying, so the change and transformation is never a tool that we use as leaders to change. As a matter of fact, as you are saying, whenever there is change, we resist, we react, we reflect. And if we are lucky, we might even remember what to do and what to say. So in that context, the wisdom after AI, or without the AI, is not about what we know, but how do we become the face of what we don't know, what we don't have. And in that context, I found, at least from the lenses that I'm looking at, like the consciousness lens, if I were to think about, I would say there are 4 places where we act from. One is obviously the conflict of different points of view, the knowledge point of view, information point of view, organization point of view, and my point of view. I and my ego, I'm in this position. I'm a panelist. I should make a point here, right? That's the arrogance with which we sometimes come from. That I call it a kind of, there is a word where it is not like you are ignorant, but you are confused with your thinking about multiple things coming in. So there is a different times, different stuff pops up as if you are making some intelligent statements. You hope nobody will figure out that I'm just coming out of fear rather than something else. That I call, it creates more chaos rather than anything else. But if I can ground myself into what is my dharma, what is appropriate for me to say, what is enlivening for you and enlivening for me, if I call that as a dharma, in that field, something begins to emerge. That is the place for co-creation, and that's the place for questioning, inquiring, and thinking. Then once I have that clarity, I do need to stay in that place of enlivening and bring some coherence, not just in my head, not just in my emotion or heart, but I also need to feel in my body and see whether that resonates with my spirit. Because there is a big difference between emotional and spiritual places of coming from. I think the consciousness, once it is included, it becomes a little bit more spirit in action, not just emotion in action. I think that's where the alignment takes place between what is emerging from outside and what is emerging from inside, and they will have a resonance, and that becomes generative or creative place. So let us not just look at it as who we are or where we are, whether it's executive suite or as authors or as thinkers. And first, we need to feel with our heart, as Brian and Bill eloquently mentioned. But once we start resonating with the heart, we need to ask ourselves, is that the spirit of where we need to go? See, none of this AI can do. All of these are processes which require, living, vibrant, listening, deeply reflecting and embodying kind of wisdom, and that human beings can provide.
I wish I could take notes as quickly as I would, as my mind is spinning. But thankfully this, this session is being recorded. So before, I'd like to, open the floor up to questions from the audience. But before we do, if I wanted to ask, sort of as a way to wrap up this amazing conversation, what could you each offer 2 or 3 concrete questions or statements, that we can ask ourselves or we can tell ourselves, sort of what Prasad was you just said, is that the spirit of where we want to go? No, like 2 or 3 concrete questions or statements that we can tell ourselves when we're, as we face this technological disruptions in our organizations. Something concrete that we can kind of, write down a Post-it note, stick it in front of our, whether in our phone or on our laptop to help us navigate this change.
Ximena, ChatGPT has been my brainstorm partner as I'm writing the book. And this morning we were having a conversation around how I end the book. And it gave me a mantra, if you will, that I'm going to put in the chat. I have not edited this. This is not my words. It is very closely aligned to my thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, a concrete question. I was holding one yesterday as I was driving across a bridge to work, and there was a story that came on. I think I was listening to public radio, and there's a series called Bird Note. For those that have heard it, and it was actually talking about the anatomical structure of certain birds that actually have 2 voice boxes. I think it's called a syrinx. So they have 1 trachea and then 2 voice boxes, which allow them to actually sing 2 notes at the same time, distinctly and deliberately. And that's what creates harmony. And it was so beautiful to listen to the bird notes, but also understand the anatomical structure that was created to allow that. We humans and all mammals, to my knowledge, do not have that, right? The 2 voice boxes. And the question I came away from on the other side of that bridge was, if I did have that ability, what would that look like to create harmony in such a way? Which, of course, led me to this place of as we think about technology as a companion, while it may never be that second voice box, if it aspired to be, what would be the harmony that I would want resonant in the world? And that's what I encourage people to think about as they think about both change and technology. Let nature remind us, let the anatomical remind us, not only of our limitations, but also of our possibilities and our harmony.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. For me, a couple of questions that build on what both of you said is, am I reacting from fear? Or am I responding from presence? In other words, am I being conscious in being present at this moment, or am I on autopilot? Okay, these two guys said I need to say my piece. Let's see what I can do. That's the first question that comes. Am I responding from presence or fear? What is the state of mind I'm operating from? The second question is, because I have a fantastic partner, just like, both Bill and Brian and, Ximena and all of you, I found AI to be fantastic agent. It is my Ask Jeeves, if you want to call PG Wodehouse kind of novels. I can ask for anything, and I know what is the body of knowledge that exists, and it can present it to me. It can do some very nice way of making, it can do research, it can edit, it can question, it can do all of that stuff. But the agency, will I outsource the agency or evolve my own consciousness? Because it cannot do the work for me. There is no being, So at some level, what does it mean to be a human with awareness, consciousness? And because it is no longer just skill adaptation that we are talking about. It is the identity transformation. Who am I? What does it mean to be human at this moment? And in doing so, am I coming from having a right relationship with this AI technology? And can I co-create and co-sense change? Because that is one of the topics that we are talking about. Can I sense change from a deeper field of awareness and consciousness? And finally, I would also say, how can we make change become a creative emergence? Not just surviving, but flowering and flourishing, both as an individual, but as an organization. I think that would be something that is exciting for me. And those are the questions that make my heart go lub, 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 instead of just the carbon and the words that come out of a LLM. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to the three of you for your thoughts and questions. No, you also leave us with questions. Now, I'd like to open the floor up to questions from the audience. We have approximately 10 minutes, after which I will then ask Judy to make some announcements of the upcoming Edgewalker Cafe and also an Edgewalker retreat in October. And then we'll close with Brian reading what he shared in the chat. So have about 10 questions. You can put your question in the chat or unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, I want to say something. I want you guys to know that I resonate with what you're saying. The problem to me is
WhatsApp audio.
the problem. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. The problem to me is that schools teach us how to think, and work emphasizes the thinking. but they don't necessarily teach how to emotionally feel. They don't teach how to sense. They don't teach how to intuit. And unless you are, and I agree with you, unless it's not about awareness, I mean, look at Facebook page. Everybody has spiritual awareness. That doesn't mean that they're actually evolved or living their life that way. So until we can emphasize those perceptive abilities in school, we're not going anywhere. So my question for you is, how do we change the system in order to be able to deal with this AI?
I love this question. Prasad, you want to start?
Sure. I have been, I mean, just yesterday, we had 60 teachers on a panel looking at spirituality in the context of AI education. We are doing a 10-part series and with educators. So this was something that came up. So it was fresh on my mind. One of the things, like what you asked, Amy, is, do we need to pay more attention to sensing and feeling in the schools in addition to thinking? I think very much so. But it has to begin even much earlier than that. As families, I think we are forgetting how to teach our children to sense and feel, because these days with the phones, my 2-year-old granddaughter and 4-year-old granddaughter are mesmerized by phones and the YouTubes. And my 2-year-old can go on to Netflix or Amazon Prime, and she cannot speak clearly, but she knows exactly what show she wants to watch. That is scary for me, because it is like mindless filling up of stuff, because it keeps us busy. They don't get bored with the TV. They don't get bored with the phone, but they get bored with people's conversation, or sitting at dinner, or just chatting with each other, or playing outside in the backyard. So that is something I think we need to start straight from the families itself. That is one thing I'll come to. Second thing I would also say is, how do we raise questions that are not just about thinking, but experimenting, inquiring, challenging, and exploring? Then the knowledge, like for example, there is a group which asks children to look at how much space do they have in the backyard. Can they create a garden by like 8 by 10 space if they have in the backyard? And how much fertilizer do they need? If they want to update that particular place, how much mud they need to put? How many trees can they plant? What kind of trees? Because some of the trees will spread. Asking these kind of questions and experimenting with them, and also what plants do they need to put if they want to get butterflies in the backyard, and if they want to get hummingbirds into their garden. These questions and these kinds of things in schools are allowing children to not just feel, perceive, but also think together. I think that way of integrating knowing with feeling and perceiving, I think that is what will get us to go beyond the AI. And I think, as you rightly said, Amy, we need a transformation in the way in which education has to happen. And I think the open AI and all these AI agents are forcing us to rethink what it means to be a teacher now. And whether we like it or not, education is going to radically change.
Amy, I would add, it has to be modeled. I take it very, very seriously as a veteran of the US Armed Forces, that I show up in spaces and places and I lead with emotion. The only way I got to the place where I could be where I'm at now is because of awe, AWE. Awe is a great teacher. So is loss and grief. And I came from institutions educationally and institutionally through the military and now in technology, where to your point, it is almost frowned upon to lead with emotions and feeling and sensing. And that's exactly why I do it, because I'm rebelling. And the only way that other people are going to see that it's okay to do that is to see someone, quote unquote, successful doing it. So I take it very seriously. I lead with it every single time. And I understand, to the point around risk taking, every time I do it, I'm taking a risk. But I have this one wild and precious life, and I will always do that. I've learned more about myself through loss and grief and awe than I ever have in a classroom. So I 100% agree. I really appreciate the question.
Our educational system is another vestige of the industrial age. Some people get to go through it to get white-collar jobs. Some people are put through it to get blue-collar jobs. One of the things just very quickly that blew me away today was a story in the New York Times about how some college professors are integrating AI into their work. And just one example, an ethics professor who arranged for the final exam of the ethics course for the students to go into a center that housed juvenile, I believe it was juvenile delinquents,
Yeah.
to teach them ethics as they had learned it through the course, doing away with the written exam that would have been there just even a year ago. So I think, like Bill, that is leading with wild and crazy, if you will, leading with your heart. And there are always groundbreakers. If you go to my LinkedIn page, I talk about mavericks. There are always mavericks, and they are breaking the ground in education and in the future of work.
Or if that's okay, I teach energy mastery skills that come from Aikido. And, the teacher that I had wasn't just a martial artist. His interest was how the human system aligns with the universal. And recognizing that every one of us, our primary relationship is with universal energy. What I find because I've brought this work to major companies, to leaders in major companies, and what I find is that there's so much emphasis to be in their head that people have a hard time sense feeling and all of that. So it seems to me, although I agree with everything you guys have said, it seems unless there is some big movement, to regain our humanity in a larger way, our potential in a larger way, we're going to get into trouble. So I think. So that's just me. But thank you.
Amy, real quickly, one of the points in my book is the need to switch from our focus on time to our focus on energy.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time, and Judy, thank you for the nudge of to hear my thoughts on AI education and wisdom. Really quickly, what pops up for me is what kind of knowledge are we privileging in education? So because AI is unmatched when it comes to processing, when it comes to content knowledge, but something that as a conversation unfolded today, I think about the knowledge and hence like the wisdom that comes out of human interactions, of which can't be replicated with AI, even if AI, because I use AI, as a thought partner, as a refiner of thoughts, but there's always a part of me, and this goes back to some of our previous conversations. I remember Prasad talking about AI as a mirror, and we are the light, and so in education, I think, you know, debates, you know, dialogue, arts, theater, you know, like these are essentially human, you know, improv, no, like, these are human activities that I don't know how, but how can they be revalued? You know, how can we bring them to the, you know, like to the surface and invite people to, you know, sounding redundant, you know, like to really value them, to see like how that's what life is about, no? And so, yeah, I have much more to say, but I know we're running out of time, and I really do want to, you know, ask Judy to give us some announcements, you know, of Edgewalkers, and to also invite you all to look at some of the posts in our Substack, because I think our conversation is, you know, can continue there as well. So sorry, I'm just like, my mind is that this is where AI would help me to translate this cacophony of thoughts. So, 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 so this is me unfiltered. So Judy,
human.
please.
Absolutely. There's so much there to love, Ximena.
Yes.
Yeah, and Ximena, I just really want to honor you for your scholarly path of looking at AI and the educational system and your dissertation work that you're so deeply immersed in right now. So your voice matters here. So, and thank you so much for holding the space for these conversations and encouraging us to continue. I'm just really grateful for this depth of Edgewalker conversation and exploration. So the next Edgewalker Cafe is in 2 weeks. So we're now having 2 cafes every month. And the cafe is going to be on August 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern. And the topic is Celtic Season of Harvest. This time of the year is halfway between the equinox and the solstice. And in Celtic tradition, you know, it's the 2 different worlds. It's bridging the 2 different worlds. And Monica Ross, who's one of our certified facilitators, and Rona Graham, who's a person who works very closely with Monica from Scotland and Ireland, the 2 of them, are going to walk us through very experiential session. They did something similar in February at that same time that was between Imbolc, which is between the equinox and the solstice, and just beautiful rituals and experience to think about having a foot in each world. And so I hope you'll be able to join us for that. And then the retreat that Ximena mentioned is happening in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I live, in the end of October. I chose the weekend that was closest to Halloween, All Hallows Eve, Day of the Dead, because again, in the year's cycle, that is very much liminal space where the veil is thin between the worlds. And so it is an experiential session to help individuals really look at what wants to emerge on their leading edge, and then how to manifest that with the support of a very loving, supportive group. And so all of the information on these things is on our website, www.edgewalkers.org. And I think that's it. I think I'm ready to turn it over back to you, Ximena, if you want, or over to Brian.
Yes, no, Brian, please. Thank you, Judy. Yes, Brian, if you can please read what you put in the chat. I think that's a wonderful way to close this session. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you all
again,
for coming.
Again, the words from ChatGPT based on my book, Leading into the Age of Wisdom. May you lead with courage when the path is unclear. May you listen for what wants to emerge, even in the quiet. May you remember that the wisdom you seek is already within you and also among you. May your leadership be an act of love, your presence a source of grounding, and your vision a light for the path ahead. Lead not to control, but to liberate. Lead not to be followed, but to walk together. This is the work, this is the way, this is the age of wisdom.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Prasad, Bill,
Yeah.
Ryan, Judy.
You know,
Thank you
I
all.
think there is a lot that you
Thank
do
you,
in the
Ximena.
silence that need to be acknowledged. I really appreciate the kind of work that you have been doing before, during, and after. And for that, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you all.
Thank you.